And thank you everybody for joining us today. So I wanted to start off by pointing out that real-time updates have become part of our new normal. The map you can see on the screen, of course, is the spread of COVID-19 cases across the globe. And this is actually data that's being updated in real time and has become part of our day-to-day life. And so the talk today is really, and what we're seeing is that this reliance on real-time data that is becoming normal for us is actually also, you know, the presence of COVID and the need to respond to it is also making the use of real-time data within exploration be adopted by the industry even faster. And down the bottom there, you can see what we all know was a bit of a disaster around the use of Excel as a database within these COVID-19 times. And again, it's a bit of a reminder that will come through in this talk that real-time data is only as good as the systems and processes behind it, that it has to be data that you can trust. So real-time data, great, but it has to be for a purpose. What's the burning platform? What's the problem? Why does exploration need to change? I'm not going to dwell on this slide. This is some work that Richard Shoddy did, which most people in the audience, I suspect, will be familiar with. But the point of it is to show that exploration needs to change, because what we're starting to see is that exploration is not as successful as it used to be. We're not discovering deposits at the rate that we used to. And if we continue on down this path, we won't be discovering enough to meet our supply demand requirements within the market. And of course, this is particularly exacerbated as we start to explore undercover. So we know that we need change. But that doesn't necessarily mean digital change or real-time change. But another factor that I think it's important for us to be considering is that this concept of changing in a digital way is actually becoming rife throughout all of the world. So this slide is a take on Industry 4.0 or Mining 4.0. This is really showing a bit of an index-centric version, I guess, of Exploration 4.0, illustrating the evolution that all of the world has seen from products to products that are quite smart, really good sensors, through to these sensors being connected and providing their data, but then all of these sensors starting to work together to create a system and then to create an entire ecosystem where geoscientists can start to make decisions. And really, as I said, the point to illustrate here is this is a change that the whole world is seeing, and so it's perhaps not surprising that within exploration we are seeing it as well, and that we need to change as the world changes. And really, I guess to stretch that analogy a little further, we call what we're doing within IMDEX, we call it the Internet of Geosensing. And the analogy is something that we're all very used to in our day-to-day lives now, is that we have sensors on our own bodies. We have sensors everywhere that are starting to track what we do and provide data about ourselves in real time, the way, say, an Apple Watch or a Fitbit does. So actually, it's completely reasonable for us to have the same expectation of the way drilling activities work, that there'll be sensors on the rig and around the rig that are telling us things about the way we're drilling and about the rocks that we're drilling, and giving us the ability to get insights from that data in real time. So again, this is kind of the new normal. What does it look like within exploration? How do we embrace it? So if we can get real-time data, and these days we certainly can, what are the sorts of questions as an industry that we would be looking to answer? Now, I'm not going to talk through this list in its complete detail, but you can see the sorts of things that we can now answer. And they're all the way through to, is the rig itself optimised? Are the fluids that the drill rig using optimal for the ground conditions that you're in? Are the tools that you're actually operating on the site, are they operating within their parameters, and indeed, are they being used correctly? And you can see then we start to evolve to more and more sophisticated questions that we can get answers to. What are the rocks that we're actually sensing? Have I drilled through the rock type that I was aiming to? Can I stop drilling this hole? Should I keep drilling this hole further? Should I go and drill another hole right next door because I've intersected something of interest? Even really simple things with directional drilling. Is the hole going in the right direction? Should I ring up my drillers and yell at them because actually the hole's gone off course and they need to correct? And then down to finally the really big question of 3D modelling in real time. Is my 3D model right? Do I need to adjust that? These are all things that with real-time data you can answer now. So it's really starting to explore the workflows and why it is and how it is that we would do that. So just before we sort of dive into that, the next question would be, from a monetary point of view, what value is it that we unleash by doing this? And this, what you see here, is actually some work that we did with Deloitte Consulting 5 or 6 years ago. And actually it was off the back of a product that we brought out of the DET CRC, which was a big CRC within Australia called Lab at Rig. But it's actually the exercise we went to is relevant to all real-time data. And what we did is we went and explored all the way across the exploration process, from area selection all the way through to target testing, and then indeed delineating a resource. What are all the activities that go on, like preparing the pad, drilling, etc., and all the way along that chain, where is it that getting information in real time would allow you to make decisions which would release value from the process? And where is most of that value actually? And this is a waterfall chart that actually shows where most of that value is. So you can see across the bottom, it describes some areas. So overall, you can see that it looked like, we estimated that with real-time data, you could save up to 20% of your exploration budget. Where was that spend, that saving mostly made? You can see parts of it were in the things that perhaps seem intuitive, that perhaps you would send less samples to the laboratory because you had real-time information about the rocks, and that would save you some money. But actually where most of the areas of saving were around this concept of drilling less meters that were wasted, that you would be able to stop holes earlier because you knew you'd gone through the rocks of interest, that you would be able to not drill holes at all because you knew that the geology had changed. And actually those two factors were the things that really, to the largest extent, drove value. And it's really, for a very large exploration budget, 20% is a really very significant saving. And of course, there's the flow-on effect of the opportunity cost of all of this, that these meters that you didn't use here in this project, you could actually go and use in another area that was more prospective by being more efficient and effective on this particular drilling program. So that, it's really just to illustrate that there's very real value to be unleashed in some of these ideas. Just touching, I'm going to move on to some examples after this, but really what this slide is intending to portray is what should a real-time data system look like. So it's really important that the quality of the data that you're collecting can be trusted. So there's a few factors to that. One is this idea that it's generally sensor-based data rather than being a human-based observation to remove subjectivity. And when you talk about the sorts of AI approaches that are becoming increasingly common in the industry, it's really sensor data that they're going to need to be able to be really effective. You need sensors to be so low enough cost that you can have them everywhere, that you don't use them some of the time, that you use them all of the time. And again, that's so that you can do AI with a really complete data set. And then the rest of it is this idea that actually to make good informed decisions, a lot of those decisions are better made in real time rather than 3 months down the track. So those are kind of some of the tenets of the sort of system that we're looking to develop. Okay, so I'm going to step through in a little bit more detail, kind of 3 of the examples that I talked about why do you need real time. And really what I want to mostly illustrate is the journey that the industry as a whole has been on over the last 5 or 6 years, from where we were to where we are now, to the sorts of things that I think you should be expecting to see in the future. So the first one that I wanted to talk through was around drilling optimization. And when we talk about drilling optimization, and Andrew Bailey, which is who has the talk that follows mine, will talk on this a little bit as well. It's really quite a holistic thing that we talk about. We talk about being effective when the bid is on the bottom to actually increase the rate of drilling, but it's also all of the other things that are going on out on a drilling site around the fluids, around the use of other sensors, around what the other activities are. And so actually to optimize drilling, you need to be collecting data about all of these different components of what's going on, because if you're measuring, then you have information that can lead to you changing what you do. And that's really, again, one of the tenets behind why you have data-driven systems. So this is really, you know, as I said, the step through here is, where were we as an industry in terms of the way we collected this sort of information about drilling? Of course, we used paper, and this still is common in some parts of the world, where people will record on a piece of paper. The drillers record what it is they've been doing. Now, these sorts of systems have been replaced to a reasonable extent now by mobile forms. I'm showing an example that is our product here, but actually there are a number now of these digital replacements for paper forms. But they're still actually relying on drillers to enter information about what's going on. So it's not that sensor-based data that I talked about as being the real source of truth and the thing that we'll really need as an industry to be able to shift. So that's where the next step comes in. And so I've stolen a video here, and in fact, coming up are some slides that I've asked for Andrew Bailey's permission to use from the MinEx CRC. And really I call this the concept of a digital twin for a drill rig, which is increasingly, you know, not common, but you see it out on an industrial site already, which is where a drill rig has sensors all over it, so that actually you can see what the drill rig is doing in real time. It can be monitored using sensors rather than the traditional approaches, which rely very much on drillers and their experience, and of course, people being on the drill rig. So the reason that I borrowed a slide of Andrew's from the MinEx CRC is that this is a project that within IMDEX we're very proud to be a part of, where we're actually looking to put sensors all over drill rigs to actually be able to monitor and optimize their performance. Now, of course, the other reason why we're looking to do this, because once you understand a system and once you optimize a system, the next thing you can do is automate that system. And that's the progression that we should expect to see the industry going through. And it's not just the drill rig, and this is a part of the project that we're particularly interested in, is actually you can also monitor the properties of the drilling fluids that are being used. This is actually one of our SRUs in the background, which is a unit which removes solids and allows the recirculation of fluid down a drill hole. But it also enables you to monitor those fluids, make sure the fluid composition is optimal. And in the case of the research that's being done within the MinEx CRC, again, it's to lead to this concept of auto-dosing of fluids so that you can have a fully automated drilling system, because we can't just automate the rig. We actually have to look to automate the whole system. So the next example I wanted to talk about is survey data. Now, again, the path that we've seen survey data taken starts with it being paper-based. And you can see here a very beautiful piece of paper where a driller has written down using with their grease-stained fingers what the dip and the azimuth of the hole is. And that's the only information that a geologist gets. They get it by going and getting that piece of paper from the rig. Or my favourite, where someone takes a photo of a piece of paper and then sends it to somebody and calls it a digital workflow. Now, of course, there's no chain of custody around that. You can't guarantee that that data is correct. You're losing a lot of extra metadata about the quality of the survey itself and the tool and its operation. And the likelihood of you getting it in real time is quite low unless the driller literally takes a photo every time they take a survey. So it's not a very effective way to get survey data. And so with the Index Hub IQ and a number of other service companies have done this now, we removed all of that and allowed a workflow where the data went straight from the tool into the cloud, into a geologist database and into their 3D viewing package so that they could use that data straight away to monitor the hole. But again, remember I talked at the start about product systems. A tool talking to the hub is just a connected product. What we really are looking to see now within the industry is these systems. And in this case, the system is navigational software to plan your hole, the tools to actually monitor that you're proceeding against that plan, the hub to allow the transfer of that data to where a geologist wants to use it, and then actually being able to see it where a geologist wants to use it, which if I just move to this slide, this actually shows the link through from Index Hub IQ to Sequence Central product. And this is where geologists really make decision, where they have their data in front of them in real time. They can see the ore body, they can see the drill hole as it's being drilled, they can see whether it's on target, they can see if it's going to hit, or they can see whether they need to talk to the drillers and make a change to the plan. And it's this concept of all the different parts of the system working together to give a geologist an outcome that is really where the future lies. And then the next order up again, starting to change the way geologists log. You know, why would we look to do this? This is an example of the different words that a geologist will use to describe the colour grey, and then another whole really long list of words to describe the colour orange, where really in order to actually use this data for things like AI, what you needed to know is that it was grey or it was orange. The rest is detail, which actually makes the data impossible to work with. And of course, this is if you replace a geologist with an image, with a camera, that gives you a sensor information and will give you a colour scale score so you know grey and you know orange. And that's the sort of workflows that we're starting to look towards now, where we have drillers can use quite smart sensors to gather data, which gets exposed to geologists, and potentially actually AI products get exposed to geologists and they can make decisions based off of that. So in this case, the analytics that you can see over on the far right is a thing called a wavelet tessellation, which actually also came out of the DET CRC. And it's a boundary picking mechanism. So in this case, we've used a gamma tool, a natural gamma tool, to actually pick boundaries between rocks, which means that a geologist, when it goes and logs that same piece of core, can see where boundaries have been picked by the natural gamma signal and can use that to guide their logging to identify what are the rocks in each of those areas between each of those boundaries. So it's a workflow to aid geologists do a better job in real time of logging their drilling. And then in this slide, I don't want to talk about this in any detail. So Sasha Ponchal is going to be speaking later today. Actually, it's very early in the morning her time when she'll be speaking. Recently at Index, we purchased Osiris, so the company Ozspec, and Osiris, the product. And the reason we did it is because their solution is all around supplying quality real-time mineralogy data. And we think of a rock and the knowledge around a rock being split into grade, texture, location, and minerals. And so for us, within the Index world, what Osiris does is allows these sorts of workflows where you can get mineralogy information in real time. And again, it can help with these logging workflows. Just like the gamma example I showed you in the last slide, Osiris allows geologists who are using, say, a Halo or a Trek handheld device or an ASD to have mineralogy information at their fingertips in real time whilst they're looking at drilling and make decisions based off of that. So the holy grail a little bit, and again, I'm going to call out that this is something that the MinEx CRC are looking at as well, is if you're starting to gather all of this information in real time, if you're starting to use data science and analytics to interpret the rocks in real time, the end point is actually being able to do your 3D modelling and visualisation in real time. And as an industry, we're actually surprisingly close to that as being a reality of our day-to-day. And I think that's something that's very exciting. So what stops us? Change takes a lot of time. We talk a lot about this idea of crossing the chasm. This is a concept in the way disruptive products get introduced into a market. It can take a long time to go from just the early adopters, the really keen people, to the whole market wanting to do something. And so this is something for the minerals industry to face and for exploration to face. How do we as an industry adopt these technologies that are going to help us? And how do we get across that chasm together? And my final slide, one of the things that stops us is ourselves and the way we perceive ourselves. I talked a lot today about geologists as consumers and interpreters of data. We quite often think of ourselves in the ways that are depicted on this slide, which are a very different thing. Thank you, everybody, for your time.